Welcome to Modern Day Messengers. Don't know what episode. But we do have a special guest, and I'll let you introduce her real quick.
I don't know her.
You don't know her.
I don't know who that is.
Not for 13, how many years?
17? I mean, I saw her like 17 years ago. And
Okay.
No, this is my wife, Kristin. We told y'all we finally have a woman on our podcast, and that's
right.
That's awesome.
We are not talking.
So our rating should go up now. You got a lot better looks on the show.
What you trying to say? I'm not.
You ugly.
Yeah, so we appreciate you coming on and stepping out of your comfort zone.
Oh, yeah.
And this is going to be really good. They're going to give their testimony in a minute, but quick disclaimer. So parents, if you want to watch this first and then kind of discern if your kids are able to watch this, we're going to get real. They're going to give their testimony, and we get into some pretty deep stuff and some, I don't know, kind of explain.
Our story is one of the things like we were not the perfect Christians. We did not, we may have went to church growing up, but we didn't. Yeah. We wouldn't be in the church what we're called to be.
Right.
And so some of our testimony gets pretty dark, but I mean, it lights up at the end, baby.
Right. So just listen to it.
I would definitely use caution before showing to your children. I mean, I'm not saying you can't, but I'd say watch it first and, pray about it and see if that's something that you would want to expose your children to.
Because y'all could probably agree to this, kind of just going over, like, it kind of just looks at how having God in the relationship versus God without the relationship.
Oh, for sure.
Having a God-centered relationship. So, but anyway, I just had just a few questions for y'all, but I just want to give y'all the floor and just talk about, first up, like, how'd y'all meet? Gas station.
I was trying to order a bride off of a website, and
Brides Are Us.
Yeah, Brides Are Us, and they delivered her in a pine box.
A pine box.
Pine box.
Pine box. It had the little peanuts in there. It kept her comfortable on the shipping. No. No, but in all seriousness, we met at a high school Halloween dance. I was 15, she was 16. She thought I was good looking, so she said, "Hey, what your front name is, boy?"
Well,
I'll let you.
I would like to hear the actual version of the story.
I was gonna say, yeah, I didn't even know what he looked like at first, because everybody's dressed up.
Yeah.
And what were you were dressed up
I had the Scream costume on with the little horror Scream guy.
Yeah.
With the white mask. The one that's always stabbing people with the knife in the horror movie.
Yeah.
And I had the little heart thing you could pump, and it would put blood over the mask.
Do you know? Just real quick, side note. I had they had a costume contest back when I lived in South Louisiana. I think it was at like Pierre Part or something. And I don't know if it was family, cousin, whatever, long time ago. And he had that very exact costume, and he won.
I'm telling you, it's a boss of a costume.
Yeah.
Anyway,
okay.
Go ahead with your recollection.
No, well, he kept like coming up to me all night, and he kept like poking me with the rubber knife, and I thought it was somebody that I knew. Okay. No, literally, he would just. And so, I can't even remember. What is it? I think I finally asked you to dance or something.
No, I asked you to dance.
Oh, well, I was going to.
Well, your friends had come over there and say, "Hey, she wants to dance with you." I'm like, cool.
What grade were y'all in?
I was in 8th.
8th grade.
I was in 10th.
This was 17 years ago.
Mm-hmm. It's been a hot minute.
Yeah. Oh, no, you
go. That's 17 years ago.
17 years.
Yeah, but I was in 8th grade. She was in 10th.
Yeah. Wow.
But, it was like one of them shows, though. When I finally did take off the mask, she was like, "Oh, my gosh.
I got
that beautiful?"
No, he was not my type at all.
Wow.
No, he really wasn't. And I was like, he seems like he's kind of fun, so let me give him a shot and see.
Yeah. So, progressing years forward, y'all were in a relationship for a while, I guess, and then when y'all decide to get married, I guess.
It's actually funny. We actually got engaged the first time.
The first time.
Yeah, we
The
were
first
actually
time.
we were engaged twice.
Okay.
It got broke off, and that was stuff at the store for a whole different day. Like that has nothing to do with what our testimony is. But
Right.
then we got married 6.5 years after we started dating, huh?
I think so.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Very
well,
cool.
you skipped over somebody.
Uh-oh.
You skipped over Riley.
who's that? I barely know who you are. No, we did end up having sex outside of marriage, and she got pregnant with our first child, Riley.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
13 now. We've only been married for 5 days. It'll be 11 years. So we're 5 days away from our anniversary. So, you know, he wasn't delivered by a stork. We sinned.
That's right. That's right. But yeah, very cool. So y'all had Riley, and then y'all decided to, I guess, get married later.
Yeah, we had Riley, and then we got engaged, and then I broke it off. And then we got engaged again.
A lot of the reason, to kind of step away from trying to be funny for a minute, I guess. But one of the reasons, and I couldn't see it at the time, but one of the reasons she broke it off is because I really loved alcohol.
Yeah.
I mean, I was drinking all the time.
Right.
Like even in school, I remember I'd be in school, we'd sit in the back of the class and I'd have a Sprite bottle with some vodka in it, and I'd just be drinking at school.
Right.
Alcohol had a very heavy presence in my life and what
Yeah.
caused a lot of our issues.
Yeah, I chuckle because y'all probably hear my little boy in the background. We have blankets and all kind of stuff they don't have a door, so
Trying to eat the sound, but it's not doing.
yeah, my little boy can be a little loud. So anyway, so yeah, alcohol is a big deal. We do see that in society today, 100%. So y'all get married, okay, and then so tell me a little bit about y'all marriage at first. A lot of I guess statistically speaking, they say the first 5 years is the hardest. Was that true for y'all, or?
I would say it was the most unfruitful, but it wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily the hardest because neither one of us were living for God.
Yeah.
So when we both weren't living for God, it was like, okay, let's just do whatever we want to do kind of thing.
Right.
So it wasn't, in a sense, hard. In my opinion, I would just classify it as unfruitful.
Yeah, empty?
Empty.
Yeah. We thought we were living for God,
Yeah.
but we weren't.
No.
So, yeah, because she went to Cook Baptist her whole life. I went to South Parkway my whole life. And they're both great churches, not taken away from none of them. But when I went to her church, hers was a little too, for me.
Stiff.
Yeah, and mine was a little too excited for her.
Yeah.
So
right.
we ended up at First Baptist, and we compromised. We ended up at First Baptist Ruston, where Pastor Chris is the pastor there. I think he's still there to this day. And he was a great pastor. It was a great church. They had a great thing, but it just wasn't where God had us. And we started making these excuses on not to go. Oh, I don't feel like it. Oh, I got a headache. Oh,
Yeah, there were a lot of
we were
times.
more not going than we were attending. So
Yeah. That's where I first met both of y'all, was Cook Baptist Church.
it was. I remember you had that guitar and I wanted, still want.
Yeah.
But so we learned the Christian lingo, old pastors there. Hey, pastor, how you doing? Oh, I'm blessed, pastor. Oh, the Lord loves me.
Yeah.
You learn the lingo, you learn to talk, you learn how to dress. You learn, you're a pretty good actor.
Going through the motions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we talked about this about putting on masks before. Mm-hmm. And then outside of that, and then it's so exhausting and having to do that, so. But, okay. So, I know we're about to get into the real part of would you probably say it was the hardest part of your
Yes.
marriage?
Oh, for sure.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about that a little bit, about how everything got started, and cuz you say it kind of set it up to where y'all both weren't living for God. Devin, you weren't being a leader that that God
Oh, by
called
no
you.
means.
Right. So
By no means was I.
so it kind of sets it up to where, for the viewers watching, that it is so important to have a God-centered relationship, because what we're about to talk about is what happens when you don't. And so whoever wants to start that off about when things started to get rocky or whoever.
You want me to start it off?
I don't know. That's all.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start off my little part, and I guess you can chime in on your perspective on it. Like I said, I always had a problem with alcohol, and then, before we got married, I had two of my friends living with me, and we drank. Well, actually, one was my cousin, and one was my best friend at the time.
Yeah.
And so we were drinking nonstop. And then, it got to the point, like she said, where she broke off the engagement, and that was due to the alcohol. So I got real good at hiding it.
Right.
So and actually, I think my buddy still has you blocked because he wanted to keep posting party pictures on Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
And he blocked you so you couldn't see it and get mad at me.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, so, I got really good at hiding my alcohol problems. But, and I don't blame the alcohol. I blame myself because I let that be used to stray me from the Lord. Because I know it may or may not be directly related, but it was allowing sin into my life. I wasn't trusting God, and I was trusting in basically the God of alcohol and the God of sin. And so we get married, and everybody thinks you got a kid outside of marriage. You get married, it'll fix everything. Well, it didn't. We just put a Band-Aid on a artery bleed kind of thing.
Right.
And so we get there, and we don't like each other at this point. We're just basically roommates.
Yeah.
We're married, but. We would sit pretty much all day and not say a word to each other at the house.
Yeah.
It was that bad. But so I started. My man pride said, "Well, if she's not going to pay me the attention I want, then I'm gonna go find it elsewhere." So I ended up downloading an app, and I'm not gonna say the name of the app because I don't want it, people. Oh, let me go get that app.
Right.
But it made it real easy to get involved in, extramarital affairs and things like that. Well, I worked I was in law enforcement at the time, which I still am, but
Right.
there was a person on there with what law enforcement calls badge bunnies. She liked police officers.
Right.
But there was other things like that that went on, and I entertained that thought. I had. Oh, this woman right here is paying attention to me. Oh, she respects me, So I started entertaining that, and it started off. Oh, let's go to the park, hang out, do this, go walk, and eventually she invited me to her house, and things happened,
Right.
and I ended up involved in an affair,
Right.
and now I've got my pride and ego struck, so now I'm good.
Yeah.
We can hate each other all the time at the house, but I'm good.
Right. Right.
But did you want to chime in on anything?
Yeah.
I just want to know, how that. Did you know? I assume you didn't know right at first, but did you have a suspicion?
I had a feeling, and I don't know, it's hard to describe. It's one of those feelings where it's I really feel like something's going on, but I can't prove it. I know one day I had come home from work, and I was just gonna see even if he was still there, and
Yeah.
I was like, if somebody's at my house,
Yeah.
it's about to go down.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you were asleep because you were working because your schedule was days and nights, so a lot of my perspective was I was very lonely because he wasn't there a lot,
Right.
and growing up the way I did, you put your smile on,
Mm-hmm.
and you keep everything shoved deep, deep, deep down. So even today, sometimes he still has to make me talk about things.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, what's going on? He has to kind of pull some of it out of me. But I wasn't talking to him, and I was very lonely. And so I just kind of retreated into my own little hobbies that I had going on, keep my mind busy, and kind of put this little shell around myself. So, but yeah, I kind of had an inkling that something was going on, but I was like, you need to trust him. He's your husband,
Right.
That was dumb.
Yeah.
But just kind of add to it, just to kind of I guess expand on the sin of lust. It doesn't just stop when hey, I got this one of the relationship outside of my marriage. Now I'm starting to entertain there's some conversations that I'm toting that flirting line with,
Right.
and it's almost one of those things you're innocently flirting
Right.
I use that in extreme air quotes to see how that other
Right.
woman's going to react, to see if I can tote that line a little further.
Right.
It's like, but you know, I mean, and it, like I said, all this is known now, obviously, because if not, she'd be stabbing me. But you know, so I mean, so this goes on for a while, man, and she wanted to get counseling. She's like, hey, you know, I guess she finally like, hey, we need to get counseling. But I did the man thing. Oh, I'm a man, you know, I'm not going
Yeah.
to talk to no man about my problems, and
Well,
you know, so he can tell me how wrong
Did y'all
I am.
decide to get counseling? Like, did she find out, or did you?
Not at the time.
Not at the time.
Not at the time. Because she had been wanting counseling for some years before that.
Right.
Well, I say years, probably years. I don't know.
Right.
I think it was just that year.
Maybe. Yeah, so just to kind of expand back on that. Yeah, so she had wanted counseling. I don't remember how long it was, but she had wanted counseling before. Like I said, she may have had her suspicion, but before it all came out as fact and she knew everything,
Yeah.
she had been wanting counseling. Yeah. And, you know, I did the man thing. Oh, I'm a man, you know, we'll handle our problems in the house. The problem was, he wasn't handling nothing in the house.
That's right.
Yeah.
This is, let's sweep it under the rug and see how big of a pile we can get in there
know
before it starts to stink.
Yeah.
But
I know it.
so, and just to kind of fast forward and not go through I mean, because if we went through every single thing, you don't have enough time in the podcast to do it. But so we go to the Angola rodeo.
Yeah, we actually stepped away for that weekend saying, okay, we need some time alone to kind of help our marriage and to focus on each other.
I forgot something. Bad. Before that trip, I was actually coming home from this lady's house one night, and you know, this was just leading up to this event that we're about to tell you about. But so, like, I just had this overwhelming guilty feeling, and you know, it was looking back now, it was God like, hey man, we need to fix this kind of crap. Like you're here in the mud and the muck, and you're about to, you know, I was already making mistakes that I shouldn't have been doing.
Right.
But I mean, it got to the point I'm like, man, I don't know a way out of this. I want to get out of this situation, and nobody knows it, and nobody's feelings are hurt, and everybody goes back to their happy-go-lucky lives kind of thing.
Right.
But I couldn't figure out how to do that. And there was one night I was driving back from this lady's house. It was like 3:00 in the morning. Kristin ain't never awake at this point. So I'm in my truck. I'm driving on the interstate, and I speeded up to about 90 miles an hour. And I'm like, I'm just going to run into this tree. That's how I'm going to end it. That's how I end it. And she calls me. I get my truck. I'm sitting here ticking right at 90 on my truck, and she calls me. She just so happened to wake up and call me. Kind of sunk me back into the situation.
Wow.
Yeah. But anyway, did you?
Yeah, so we had went on that trip. We actually went to the Angola rodeo in Baton Rouge for the weekend. And on the way back is when you had finally kind of decided to break the news to me. And then we had the next 4 hours to drive.
Okay, yeah. So, disclaimer. You need to be honest with your lady if you're in that situation anyway, or your husband, whatever which way it goes. May not be a good idea to tell them while you still have 4 hours to drive in a tin can.
So,
I couldn't run.
no.
But it was crazy because on the way back, and like I tell people all the time, God talks to me through billboards, and here's where that story come from. So we're driving, and on the way back from Angola Rodeo, and I see this first billboard sign that says "Heaven or Hell, you choose." And I was already feeling guilty, so it started like wrenching on me. And then a few more miles, it says something along the lines of "True repentance begins at confession." I'm like, ooh. So, and then we saw the third sign, and then I don't remember what it said at this point, but it was over at that point. And,
You had to tell her.
yeah, it was not a pretty situation.
I wanna rewind back. Just like like when you were driving your truck, you said she called you. She normally doesn't do that, but like what did any specific thing transpire through the conversation that made you just like?
She just was calling to see where I was at.
Yeah.
And like I said, this is the point where I think that suspicion became like where she knew.
Right.
Like whether she wants to tell herself or not, she knew. Right. She knew something was going on. And so it was more probably one of them things. She was probably calling me trying to check and make sure see if I was at the lady's house.
Right.
And I don't know, but it just, like, I'm sitting here thinking like, oh, I'm about to just wreck this truck and, end it. But like just her calling me just kind of shook my mind back to
reality.
Like, yeah,
right.
Like this isn't going to solve anything.
Okay, I just wanted to know
But looking back now, I truly believe all that was orchestrated by God, because I mean, here I am, 90 miles an hour. She don't ever wake up at this time. She wakes up, she calls me. It's like God's like, hey,
Yeah.
Like I've got something on the other end of this. You just have to get there.
Right, exactly. So, yeah. So you tell her
Yeah.
4 hours to go home. Now, what happens after that?
Well, I'll let you. I've been running my mouth.
No, you're fine. Oh, gosh. I guess then is where we really still were kind of trying to solve it ourselves.
Yeah.
And then it finally got to a point where I was like, I really, really, really think we need to go to marriage counseling. And of course, we were still going to First Baptist at that time.
Right.
And Brandon Ramsey, I don't know, is he still the counselor there?
Yeah, he still
Yeah,
does.
he's still the
He
counselor
does
there.
counseling.
And he was actually our Sunday school teacher at the time too, so we kind of knew him. So I was like, I really, really think we need to go. And Devin didn't want to go, and he was like, I really don't want to sit there and let him talk about how bad I am and what I've done. And I was like, well, something's got to happen, because I knew in my heart I didn't want a divorce. I really didn't.
Right.
So I was just trying to do whatever I could
Right.
to prevent that.
To
Like,
prevent that
hey,
from
like
happening.
if you're really repentant of this, please let's go.
Because you already had Riley,
Yeah.
at this point, and
Yeah.
so, but I know I've heard your testimony a few times, especially from Devin's end. This is actually like the first time.
This is actually the first time we've sat down together and talked
Yeah.
about it in a public setting.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
That's pretty
exactly.
fun.
Exactly. So a lot of firsts.
It sounds crazy to say that, but I really do enjoy doing this and talking about it. Not because, I want to relive it or nothing like that, by no means. But I know I don't look at the negative of it. I look at where God brought us out of it and the testimony that points back to Him. Because this testimony of ours that we went through is not to ever point anybody toward us or, how did y'all make y'all's marriage? How did it work? How did this?
Right.
We didn't do a daggum thing.
Right. Well, I was
It's because we
thinking,
surrendered
too,
it to Jesus Christ.
Right. And and look on the other aspect of that from a different perspective, as far as like some people get in that affair situation and they just want to end things. Now I would say justifiably, if even what the Bible says about that's justifiable
If you want a divorce, yeah.
if she
I
had
mean,
every-
you even told me that.
Yeah,
she
and-
had every right to, as far as that goes, and we're not. Like, I know God is all. I just want to put a disclaimer out there. I know God's all about restoration and forgiveness and fixing things as well. But, sometimes that doesn't happen, and with everybody's situation is a little different. I'm very glad that it ended up the way it did, because a powerful testimony does come out of this.
Yeah, and see, and that's the thing. Like, we were in that counseling session with Brandon for what, an hour and a half.
I don't even remember.
But anyway, he went over a lot of stuff, and I don't remember all of it.
Right.
But I do remember one thing that he said that stuck with me more than anything. Now he made the point. He let us know. He said, "Look, she has every right to leave this marriage." He said, "You broke the covenant you made between her and God, and this is completely up to her if she wants to stay with it."
Right.
So, and that was the most extent of the, you did wrong, I'm pointing fingers that he did. Now, what he said that really changed things for me, he looked at her, he looked at me, he said, I don't want you to worry about this marriage anymore. I don't want you to worry about this marriage anymore. He said, I want y'all hyper-focused on Jesus Christ and making Him the Lord of your life and trusting Him with everything you got. He said, once you establish a personal relationship with Jesus and trust Him with everything, he said, then you can try to bring that together.
Right.
And I left from that. And that's when I went home and I prayed to God. I was like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah. Right.
I've done this crap my way, and obviously I suck at it.
Right.
Big cup of suck with a free refill.
Yeah. So I know during this time was hard because obviously I went to counseling. That's great advice too, about, because it proves to the order things that just you put God absolutely first above all.
Mm-hmm.
Your spouse, and then your children and everybody else. Your family and then everybody else. So I know this was probably like a super, super hard time for you. I mean, I know it was hard for you too, but on your end, how did you cope or deal with that? As far as like, it probably took a minute to forgive, but you obviously didn't want things to end.
Yeah. It was. I had already struggled with depression before.
Right.
When I was younger. And Devin, he had already known about that before we got married or anything. He was really kind of the only person I'd ever told
Right.
anything like that about too. At one point, I was probably 14 and I struggled with the thought of suicide
Right.
because I think I was just so empty.
Right.
And of course, figured out later, I wasn't a Christian at that time. I thought I was, but I
Right.
wasn't. I got saved when I was 15.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but this kind of brought a lot of it back, and then it brought a lot of anxiety.
Right.
And that was really hard. Like, I had a lot of panic attacks.
Right.
I'd be in the middle of work and I'd have to leave and go to the bathroom, have a panic attack, and come back to work.
That's nuts.
Yeah, like I'd be like on the floor.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, okay, go back to work.
Right. Right.
But a lot of what helped was after we went to the counseling and I started, instead of, I was trying to shift my focus from like all these feelings I was having, because it was just so many feelings and it was so many emotions, and I was, trying to forgive at the same time, and I was just trying to shift that focus from me and feeling down on myself to God.
Yeah.
And when I shifted my focus, that's when God started filling those holes
Right.
in my heart, and which eventually led to forgiveness. And one thing in a verse I've always spoken over myself, and during that time I think we were studying together at night and everything too. We had really come to figure out that speaking the word aloud
Oh yeah.
is very, very powerful.
Yes.
So and it's my favorite verse today, and it's 2 Timothy 1:7, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind. So every time I would start to panic or have anxiety, I would say, God has not given you a spirit of fear. God has not given it, like over and over
Right.
again. And just had to keep reminding myself, this is of the devil. He does not want this marriage to go through.
Right.
Just don't give it and keep going.
Right.
And that verse, I like literally clung to that verse
Right.
that whole time.
That's awesome. So eventually y'all got restored.
That was not a quick process.
Yeah.
No.
I was about to say,
Like,
I
and,
know it
and
took
it's
some
crazy
time.
how the enemy will still use past hurts to bring it up. So I mean, even after, like, there'd be times where I'd get down on. I was like, I remember one time we was in church and I could just tell she was in one of them little moments where like it was really getting to her.
Yeah.
And I got down on my knees and I put a hand. I don't know if you even remember that at this point, but and I was sitting here praying over her. I mean, but it was crazy. Like, we thought everything was behind us at one point. And, years down the road, she's pregnant with our second child. And it's like the anxiety started coming back
Right.
I
at
don't-
first.
Yeah.
And like she even told me, she's like, I don't even feel nothing toward this baby.
Right.
But it
It
was
was-
just the way that and like we had already established like a relationship with Christ and what we thought was restored. I mean, and it was. I'm not saying it wasn't,
Right.
but the enemy's like, okay, here's a chink.
Yeah. Right.
I know feelings are already going to be high because of pregnancy and this and that. Let me start bringing doubts back in. Let me start bringing,
Right.
so I mean, it
Yeah.
was not a quick process.
I was gonna say, yeah. And even on the women's retreat, that was the first, because we never told anybody
Right.
besides Brandon. Like, my parents didn't, nobody knew. And Devin always told me, he was like, look, it's your right to tell anybody if you want to. And I never told anybody because I was like, I don't want them to look at him in a
Yeah,
bad
sure.
light. And I don't want them to like be like, oh, why don't you break up with him? Blah, blah, blah. I didn't want to invite people into our marriage like
I
that.
know. Yeah.
So, but when I went to the women's retreat, that was kind of the first time that I had told anybody besides, our counselor what had gone on. And come to find out, I was like, I'm not the only one that's dealt with this.
Right. Absolutely.
Because
not.
other people were like, oh, I've dealt with that too. And I'm like,
I'm not alone.
Really?
Yeah.
and I think
Yeah.
that's one way too, is the enemy wants to isolate us and
Yeah.
be like, you're the only one dealing with this. And once you
Right.
speak out and say that, people are like, oh, I've dealt with that too.
Yeah.
This is how I've dealt with it. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not by myself.
Right.
And that was the Christ Church Women's Retreat you went on that. But when I went to the Christ Church Men's Retreat, like you said, we told our story. We talked, we struggled, I'd even tell them about my alcohol, this and that. I always hid the affair part because there was just so much shame behind it. And so we're sitting at the men's retreat. This is when I was a retreatant. So John David Owens is my table leader. Awesome guy.
Yeah.
So he's sitting there and he's looking at me the whole retreat. He goes, "Man, you got something to say."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Man, I ain't got nothing to say." Man, what you talking about? He's like, "No." He's like, "There's something." He said, "There's something there." He said, "You're holding something back." He said, "If you leave that here," he said, "there'll be so much healing, but you've got to leave it here." Yeah. And you know how John David, like, he's so like energy.
He gonna make you talk.
Yeah. So it was the very last day. Actually, I think it was that morning. Like, we were getting ready to soon start packing up and going home.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Man, he said, just say it." So I told our whole little table group right there because, John David bullied me. I hope our church pastors see this and they get on to him for bullying. No, but he was 100% right. Like, that is like, I'm sitting here grown man. I'm sitting here crying. I'm already got a relationship with Christ. I thought, I'm healed and everything already. But man, and the word says, healing comes to speaking to other believers about it and confessing to other believers. And man, I never experienced that healing like that until I did. And now it's like, man, you tell too much of your story to strangers. Like, oh well.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I will tell anybody who listens.
Yeah.
And it's because I don't live in shame anymore because of what God has brought us out of.
Yeah. Well, thank God that it happened the way that it did. I do have a powerful testimony because of it. But I guess some word of advice to who's watching and just who, because I know other people have dealt with the same situation.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So what are y'all doing to like prevent anything? Because obviously you have to put up barriers.
Yeah, and I think it has to do with intentionality. I think that's my thing. I have to always be intentional about what I'm doing, what I'm allowing in. Yeah. So we have a prison ministry team that we are involved in, and we have a women's team too. And I've always been like, "Hey, don't mess," to our women's team, like, "Hey, don't message me directly.
Right.
Like, make sure Kristen's in it." Or if you call me, you better know it's going to be on speakerphone and she's right there. Now, she trusts me. I don't necessarily have to do that, but as a respect for me, it's something to keep me accountable too. But all in all, I think it's about intentionality. How I'm always looking at things through the lens of how can I honor my wife, and is doing this honoring my wife or not?
Right.
But I guess the word of advice, especially on the men's side, is, man, the world wants us to not be monogamous. They want us to live, do what makes you happy, do what makes you feel good. Yeah. Oh man, you pretty good guy, you pretty cool, you got some big muscles, you pretty cool guy, you deserve more than what your wife's giving you.
Yeah.
Or you deserve more people than just your wife.
Yeah.
But man, that is straight up the enemy, because
it is. Yeah.
The word says the enemy came to steal, kill, and destroy. And when you allow that sin into your life, don't wonder why your life is falling apart.
Right.
And I like this verse, and I was just going to bring it up since you brought up one so good. This is out of 1 John chapter 1, starting at verse 5. It says, "This is the message in which we have heard from him and declare to you, that God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. If we say that we have fellowship with him and walk in darkness, we lie and do not practice the truth. But if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus Christ, his son, cleanses us of all sin."
Yep.
I can't claim to be a follower of Jesus Christ. That was my phone, by the way. It makes loud noises.
Keep going.
But I can't claim to be a follower of Jesus Christ if I'm doing things in darkness.
Right.
I can't.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. But if I walk in the light as he is in the light, because he is the light, then his blood cleanses me of all sins.
Right.
And then if I'm cleansed of sin and I'm walking with Jesus Christ, I can be the husband that she deserves.
Right.
I can be the father that my kids deserve. And then, like I said, intentionality, we read the Bible together. We pray over each other. We pray over our kids. We're making sure, once a week, or at least once a week, we sit down around the table and eat meals as a family.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And we're open with each other. Like, if she sees me doing something that, okay, you're spending too much time doing this and that, get your pride out the way, because she's noticing something from an outside view that you're not noticing.
Right.
And for instance, like, if one of us is on our phones too much, like, even if it's innocent, maybe I'm just scrolling Facebook or whatever.
Yeah.
Hey, you spend too much time on your phone. You're taking time away from family. You're taking time away from God.
Right.
It's just making sure you're being intentional with your time.
Yeah.
Anything?
Yeah, a lot of the same things. And I think a lot of things with society today, especially like, I mean, you see it on Facebook all the time. Married people will be like, or like a woman will be like, I'm married, but this guy's my best friend. And it's like,
No.
we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
That's just
Unless, that guy is Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. That's my guy best friend right there.
Right. Exactly. Me and Jordan do the same. So.
Yeah, I
And
would be very, very careful.
And just to kind of clarify on that, that's not saying she can't have guy friends or I can't
Yeah.
have girlfriends, but there's definitely a boundary. Like one of my closest friends from high school is a girl, but there's like I'm not going over to her house and
For a
hanging out.
barbecue.
Yeah, like I'll go over to her house if she's with me,
Right. Yeah.
or
Right.
whatever the case may be. Like there's not going to be any, you're calling me at 3 a.m. to talk. Like no,
Right. Exactly.
you're a friend and you're over here.
Right. Yeah.
Jesus Christ and my wife, they're over here.
Right. Exactly.
You don't cross this line. The only person gets to be able to come across this line is Jesus Christ and my wife.
Yeah. Right.
Nobody else.
But thank you for coming on. I know it was outside of your comfort zone a little bit. Like at the beginning, she was like, "I'm so nervous," and I'm like, "It's probably just gonna be like a conversation." That's how it usually is over here.
Yeah, so we actually, when we presented it to Christian, she's like, "Oh no, I need questions. Like, come up with some questions. Like, I need questions so I can prepare my answers." Like, okay, whatever. So
I think
I told Trey, I was like,
yeah.
"Hey, send her some questions so she'll feel better about it."
Yeah.
And he sent like a list of 20 questions. You know how many we covered?
2, 3.
2. Like, it ended up just being a conversation, like like me and Trey knew it was
That's how I
going to
love
be.
it. But I did want to recap on this. First of all, thank y'all for listening, and I do want to just recap on the importance of how working in the design of things that God created it to be. So you being the leader, there was a failure there,
Well, for sure.
and
Many.
so right, and it's not that you're going to be a perfect leader. It's just that you understand who your your chief of command is now.
Yeah.
So working in that order, you obviously know that it works. God first. You take orders from God, and then you can therefore lead your family. But the part I want to talk about is the enticement, or like the entitlement of just being so. Like we obviously can agree that it was pride,
Oh yeah, for sure.
selfishness.
100% of the way through that.
Yeah, and you fed into the enticements, and it may have just been downloading that app, and just scrolling through, and then it was little by little, and then you finally got entangled in it,
Yeah.
and that's when it all just fell apart.
Well, that goes back to that movie we watched, Nefarious.
Yeah.
When he was talking to the demon about it, he
That's
said,
right.
and the demon's telling him the way they do is like, it doesn't start off by people just waking up and deciding to murder. I'm paraphrasing here.
Right.
But he said it just starts as a kid. Oh, we steal a little toy here. Oh, we're comfortable with that, so let's steal something a little bigger.
Right.
Let's steal. It's the same way with every sin.
Yeah, that's right. And so, being enticed, entangled in it, we can make excuses for anything, like any type of addiction or, so we have to be really careful about that, because we can fall into something that I hope he's okay.
He's all right.
But we can fall into something that we never intended to be.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into it, but my testimony is very similar to that. It started out with, I don't know, buying a can of dip down at the gas station. It ended up going into a very similar story. And I just, with the whole drugs and alcohol and everything, and started out with just a little bit, but you give the enemy a foothold and he's going to wedge himself in. That's why it's always important. That's a reason why God calls us to put on armor, because if you don't know you're in a battle, you're going to lose.
And I want to say it was Pastor Amos who told me this. I'm not 100% sure if it was him, but I think it was. But he was talking about, 1%, 1 degrees off may not seem like a lot right at the beginning, but the further you go out with 1%, the wider that gap gets.
1 degree.
1 degree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said 1%, but yeah, one degree. You know, right here it may just be so small you can't
It's
see it, but the further I go out, that 1 degree is a little bit bigger. Okay, a little bit bigger. By the time I look back, I don't even know where I began.
yeah, exactly. You're so far away. Yeah.
One thing, this speaking to the men and the husbands here, put that pride aside. Like, that pride is what's going to cause your marriage to fail. It's going to cause your fathership to fail. It's going to cause your spiritual leadership to fail.
Right.
Like, there is nothing wrong with being a man and being proud that you're the way God made you.
That's right.
I'm not saying like, oh, you got to be, you know, feminine or anything like that or whatever. But when it comes to things, especially with the relationships with the father and your family, you have to put that pride aside and say, what am I doing wrong? Am I leading my family right? Am I making sure I'm pouring Jesus into them?
Right.
Am I loving my wife like Christ loves the church?
That's right.
But and if you're involved in, you know, that kind of thing like I was, man, I'm not gonna tell you it's gonna be pretty, and you may get beat up,
Yeah.
but it's time to sit down, man up, and rip that Band-Aid off.
Yeah, that's it. So, do you have anything to encourage the women out there who may be struggling with relationships or any type of that?
Oh gosh, I would just say, I mean, the one thing that I struggled with was just being honest. Don't
Yeah.
keep it all inside, and especially if you're like a mom, because we get so focused on our roles as moms that
Yeah.
we neglect our roles as wives as well.
That's good. That's really good.
Because we're not going to be effective as moms if
Right.
we don't put our marriage first.
Right. Yeah. We just went to a conference. I know we'll probably cover that in the next episode, but we just went to a conference and it was talking about men mostly, but it applied to women as well. Talking about the spouse relationship is so important for your kids to see, because that's where the example is set on how y'all love each other. Because characteristic, like learned behaviors, or they learn how to love on the example they were shown. So, but very cool. You got anything else to add, Devin?
Life's a garden. Dig it.
I dig it. Okay. All right. Yeah. Wise words from Devin. I'm gonna put that on the screen.
That's like I said, that's from the philosopher David Spade, aka Joe Dirte.
Oh my gosh.
Thank y'all for listening to Modern Day Messengers. Thanks for Kristin for coming on as a special guest. Thank y'all for sharing your testimony. We'll see y'all next time.
Have a blessed day.